For years, Sean Diddy Combs' name has floated through the industry, surrounded by rumors, whispers, and things people preferred not to look at too closely. But recently, something changed. The conversations got louder, the reactions got sharper, and suddenly, the same stories everyone once brushed off started coming back with receipts. At the center of it all is someone who's never been afraid to speak when others stay quiet: 50 Cent. What started as long-running tension turned into something far more serious when a documentary dropped and sent shockwaves through the music world. Legal teams went into overdrive, footage surfaced that wasn't meant to be seen, and names people thought were untouchable were suddenly back in the spotlight. This isn't just about old beef, internet trolling, or industry gossip anymore. It's about why certain stories are resurfacing now, who's trying to stop them, and what might still be waiting behind the scenes. Because if this much chaos followed what was already released, the real question is, what hasn't been shown yet?
And if you got a wild party and P. Diddy puts on that wild party and, he sets everybody up. Like if you were an intelligence agent, like a Jeffrey Epstein type deal, that'd be the way to do it. Big old crazy party, get everybody loose.
And get the cameras
Get them
rolling.
the yayo. Get them the yayo.
And everything else.
Get them everything you need. Get fired up. Get those cameras rolling. And now you got everybody under wraps.
For a long time, people treated 50 Cent's comments about Diddy like background noise, just another rivalry, just another rapper talking ST. But that explanation doesn't really hold up when you look at how long this tension has been building and how calculated it's become. This didn't start with a documentary. It started decades ago, behind closed doors, when power, control, and respect were already clashing. Industry insiders have said the friction came from business deals that never happened, loyalty lines that got crossed, and a refusal to play by the same rules. While most people moved on, 50 never really did. What makes this moment different is timing. 50 isn't just reacting, he's choosing his moment. By now, he's financially untouchable, culturally established, and no longer dependent on industry approval. That freedom matters. It means he can amplify stories without worrying about getting blackballed or silenced the way others might be. And there's another layer people often overlook. 50 has always framed his moves as strategy, not emotion. He doesn't rush, he waits. And when he acts, it's usually because the environment is already shifting. Allegations were already circulating. Investigations were already happening. Public opinion was already cracking. So when this documentary arrived, it didn't come out of nowhere. It landed in a moment where the industry was already on edge, and 50 simply applied pressure where it hurt the most. But pushing the story forward also meant taking risks, because once you pull on a thread like this, you don't get to control what unravels next. And that's where things started to escalate fast. When the documentary finally dropped, the reaction was immediate and telling. This wasn't met with silence or indifference, it was met with urgency. Lawyers moved fast, statements were issued, and behind the scenes, there were clear attempts to slow things down. What stood out wasn't just what the documentary showed, but how aggressively it was challenged. According to reports, legal teams pushed back hard, claiming certain footage should never have been released. Cease and desist letters followed. The message was clear. This wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. And yet, the project stayed up. That's when people started asking the real questions. If this was just another biased hit piece, why react like this? Why not ignore it? Why not let it fade the way so many accusations in the past had? The answer might be in the footage itself. Viewers weren't just seeing interviews and opinions, they were seeing behind-the-scenes moments, legal strategy discussions, and clips that felt too raw, too private, and too real to be coincidence. It gave the impression that someone, somewhere, lost control of the narrative. Even more interesting was what didn't make it into the final cut. Several voices later claimed entire segments were removed, names were left out, and stories were softened before release. Whether that's true or not, the perception alone fueled speculation, and speculation spreads faster than facts ever could. At that point, the documentary stopped being the story. The reaction to it became the story, because when powerful people rush to shut something down, it usually means one thing: whatever comes next is far bigger than what we've already seen.
The Barge family, that should die under the jail.
As the dust settled, a new conversation began to take shape. Not about what was shown, but about what wasn't. Almost immediately, people close to the situation started pointing out gaps, stories that felt unfinished, timelines that skipped key moments, and names that were strangely absent. Several commentators and former insiders claimed the documentary only scratched the surface. According to them, entire segments were either cut down or removed altogether. not because they lacked credibility, but because including them would have pulled even more powerful figures into the spotlight. Whether those claims are accurate or not, the idea alone was enough to reignite years of speculation. What made this more believable to some was the pattern. The industry has a long history of protecting itself. When allegations stay isolated, they're manageable. But when connections start forming, when dots begin to line up, that's when pressure gets applied. And suddenly, stories get labeled as too messy, too risky, or not fully verified. This is where rumors really took off. Online discussions exploded with theories about deleted footage, unnamed individuals, and behind-the-scenes negotiations. Some suggested streaming platforms have limits on how far they're willing to go. Others claimed certain topics were quietly off limits from the start. Again, none of this proves anything on its own. But it does raise an uncomfortable question. If everything was already out in the open, why does it feel like parts of the story were deliberately kept out of frame? Because when multiple people independently hint that something bigger exists, something we haven't seen, curiosity turns into suspicion. And once that happens, attention shifts away from the documentary itself and toward the past events it indirectly brought back into focus.
Well, there's a guy named Neil who was mentioned in the court, works right up under Diddy, was organizing everything. Allegedly, they are saying that he is on video, film, tampering with witnesses, giving out addresses, offering money, bribing.
For years, the murder of Tupac Shakur lived in a strange space, officially unsolved, endlessly discussed, and quietly avoided by many in the industry. People talked about it in documentaries, interviews, and late-night debates, but it always stopped short of real momentum, until now. What changed wasn't a single new accusation, it was the way multiple old threads suddenly lined up again. Family members, former associates, and past investigators began reappearing in public conversations, all pointing to unresolved questions that never truly went away. And once the documentary resurfaced those tensions, the Tupac case was pulled back into focus almost overnight. It's important to be clear here. Much of what's being discussed remains allegations, theories, and claims, not proven facts. But even so, the renewed attention itself is significant. Reports suggest that Tupac's family has pushed for further examination of connections that were previously treated as background noise. Names that were once mentioned casually started appearing with more weight attached to them. Former industry insiders have also spoken about strange decisions made around the time of Tupac's death. Unusual travel patterns, unexplained movements, and relationships that suddenly felt more relevant when revisited years later. None of this is new information on its own. What's new is that it's being taken seriously again. That's what made people uncomfortable, because reopening a case like this doesn't just question the past, it threatens to reframe it. And if even a fraction of these claims were ever fully explored, the fallout wouldn't stop with one person. So when the Tupac conversation resurfaced alongside the documentary, it felt less like coincidence and more like a pressure point finally being pressed. And that pressure didn't stay confined to history for long. As the conversation grew louder, something else became impossible to ignore. Who wasn't talking? While clips went viral and speculation spread online, many powerful voices stayed noticeably silent. No statements, no denials, no clear support either, just distance. That silence matters. In the music industry, survival often depends on relationships. Careers are built on favors, alliances, and shared history. When someone becomes controversial, the instinct isn't always to defend or attack, it's to disappear. Because speaking up means choosing a side, and choosing a side can cost you everything. This is why some stories never fully break. They don't need to be disproven, they just need to be ignored long enough for attention to move on. And for years, that strategy worked. Allegations stayed fragmented, conversations stayed scattered. Nothing connected strongly enough to force accountability, but this time felt different. The reason 50 Cent's involvement changed the dynamic is simple. He isn't dependent on those systems anymore. He doesn't need industry protection, playlist placement, or executive approval. That puts him in a rare position, one where pressure doesn't work the way it used to. Meanwhile, others had far more to lose. If deeper connections were ever examined publicly, the impact wouldn't stop at one individual. It could ripple through labels, executives, and partnerships built over decades. That possibility alone explains why certain topics feel radioactive. So instead of open confrontation, what followed was something quieter, selective silence, vague statements, and a careful effort to let time do the work. But silence doesn't erase curiosity. And once people start noticing who avoids the conversation, they start asking why. That's when the story stopped being about one documentary and started looking like a much larger power struggle unfolding in real time. Up until this point, everything could still be framed as media, business, or history being re-examined, but then the tone shifted. What had stayed mostly indirect suddenly became personal and public. Social media lit the fuse. Comments escalated into direct responses, and for the first time, family members were pulled into the conversation. Lines that usually stay off limits were crossed, and the situation stopped feeling like distant industry drama. It became immediate, emotional, and harder to control. Instead of backing away, 50 leaned into it, but in a calculated way. No emotional rants, no long explanations, just sharp, dismissive responses that made it clear he wasn't intimidated and wasn't planning to slow down. To some, it looked like trolling. To others, it felt like a message. Pressure tactics weren't going to work this time. What made this moment important wasn't the insults themselves, it was what they represented. When a situation reaches the point where relatives and personal threats enter the picture, it usually means something deeper is at stake. The stress isn't theoretical anymore, it's real, and that kind of escalation tends to have consequences, because once things turn personal, there's no clean exit. Every response fuels the next headline, every reaction invites more scrutiny, and suddenly, what could have stayed contained becomes a spectacle the public can't look away from. At that stage, the question was no longer whether the story would continue. The question became how far it could go, and what would happen if the next move wasn't a post, but another release. As things stand now, one detail keeps coming up over and over again, the suggestion that this isn't the end. Hints, comments, and offhand remarks have all pointed in the same direction. There may be more material that hasn't seen the light of day yet. 50 Cent himself has fueled that idea by implying that not everything could be included in the original release. Whether that means additional footage, unused interviews, or entire storylines that were never cleared for distribution, it's enough to keep people watching closely. Because once the possibility of a second wave exists, anticipation does the rest. There's also the question of where that material would surface. Some believe future releases wouldn't go through traditional platforms at all. No corporate oversight, no editorial limits, just direct distribution where nothing has to be softened or trimmed to fit anyone else's comfort level. If that happens, the stakes change completely. At that point, the focus wouldn't be on a single documentary or a single figure anymore. It would shift to accountability, reaction, and fallout. Who responds, who stays silent, and who suddenly finds themselves answering questions they've avoided for years. For now, everything sits in a tense pause. No clear announcements, no confirmations, just a sense that something unresolved is still hanging in the air. And in stories like this, that silence usually isn't the end. It's the moment right before the next move. At its core, this story isn't just about a documentary, a rivalry, or even a single person. It's about how power works when it's been protected for a long time, and what happens when that protection starts to crack. Nothing we've talked about exists in isolation. The resurfaced cases, the industry silence, the sudden pushback, and the hints of unreleased material all point to the same reality. Some stories don't disappear, they wait, and when the timing changes, they come back louder than before. Whether every claim holds up or not isn't the only thing that matters. What matters is that people are finally paying attention. Questions that were once brushed aside are being asked again. And once that door opens, it's almost impossible to close it completely. So the real takeaway isn't about choosing sides or jumping to conclusions. It's about recognizing a pattern, one where truth, rumor, fear, and influence collide behind the scenes of fame and money. Because if this much tension followed what's already been revealed, then the biggest question remains unanswered. Is this the full story or just the part we're allowed to see?